a little bit quicker when you baptize them in a 350-degree jacuzzi. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Rob Reacts. Today we're going to be reacting to a brand new channel for me. I'm all about some wildlife conservation. I'm also all about some crawfish. If y'all have seen any of my cooking videos, I can show you what to do with a sack of crawfish. But I saw this video popped up in my feed and said I needed to check it out. It's about a 15-minute watch. And I said, okay, I might take a look at this, because in Australia, apparently, they relocated some crawfish from some rivers and put them in some fields to see what would happen. Now, I know in South Louisiana, if you take crawfish and put them in fields, that you are flooding and drawing down. What you've created is crawfish ponds. They often grow rice and crawfish in the same waters in South Louisiana from this. So I wanted to see what Australia found out about this. So without further ado, we're going to start this video, and I'm going to do that annoying reactor where I'll come in and pause the video when I have something to add to what they're putting in. So let's check this one out.
What do Antarctica and Australia have in common? They're both in the top driest continents. Antarctica's number one, with Australia right behind it. Then again, Australia could be considered first. It's the driest inhabited continent. No one's made a top list of the most barren lands by area, but rest assured, Australia'd still snag a top spot here. The soil on the continent's a total nightmare for farmers, forcing them to hunt for even the tiniest patch where something can actually grow. On top of that, in the rice fields of Australia, you can find Charax quadricarinatus and other tongue-twisting names. Nope, it's not some new farming invention or a magic spell. These are crayfish. Australians dump them by the millions right where one of the world's most important crops grows. Why?
Yep.
Let's find out.
Yep, sounds like they're doing the same business model that they do in South Louisiana or Southwest Louisiana, where you get a lot of what, we'll call, when you go to buy crawfish, you're going, are these wild caught or are these pond raised crawfish? They're all wild. You're letting these crawfish go in rice fields, and you're just harvesting them later, so you aren't having to take a boat out through the swamp like Keith and Tara's brother and brother-in-law, if you will, out there in Lake Verret, out there running crawfish traps. They run a whole different trap system. So let's see what's going on over here.
Take a look at this map. The huge dark spot in the center is desert land. Not exactly like the Sahara, but that doesn't make any difference because there's a water shortage there. Only relatively small areas on the edges of the continent are somewhat suitable for growing anything, and the rest is just an endless problem. Most of Australia gets less than 24 inches of rainfall a year, and some places, like the central regions, get as little as 2 inches. Looking at the continent as a whole, the average annual rainfall is about 16 inches. For comparison, the global average is 37 inches. Basically a real shortage.
FYI, where I live, the annual rainfall average in South Mississippi, where I live, is like 59.5 inches a year, which that is half an inch away from being able to classify where I live as a rainforest.
One of the most striking examples of severe water scarcity is the Murray-Darling Basin, Australia's largest river system. This basin has endured several devastating droughts, including the so-called Millennium Drought, which lasted from 1997 to 2009. Back in 2006, rainfall in the basin was 40 to 60% below average, the lowest level since 1900. It was recorded that only 4 inches fell compared to the usual 15 inches. At the height of this drought, water flow into the basin fell to just 40% of its usual level, leading to dangerously low water levels in rivers and lakes. For example, Lake Menindee, part of this system, would almost completely dry up during severe droughts, turning from...
Okay, I want to go back and look at something. I want to show y'all something. Yeah, if you look at this, you can tell this is completely man-made. One, you've got perfect squares or rectangles, if you will, of vegetation. And if you really take a look, you could see all these are planted in rows. And where I'm out in southeast Mississippi, this land before us Europeans ever got here was a longleaf pine ecosystem, which it was pretty much, it was like a prairie. A longleaf pine savanna looks like a prairie. You've got waist-high grasses that come up that you're walking through, and then you've got longleaf pine trees not planted in a row. They just kind of grow where they grow. And now, if you look at our woods on satellite views, much like this, you'll see that our pine trees, you'll see that people are planting them in rows because they've harvested all that longleaf off that area and they've replanted with something called loblolly. And loblolly pine, it grows faster, so they said, oh, we're able to harvest them quicker, so let's get these in there and we'll make more money. And I've heard it said that, the longleaf pine is the pine tree that all other pine trees want to grow up to be. The difference is you look after a hurricane comes through this area and you'll look where all the loblollies were, you'll see about 15, 20 foot up that tree. That's where the tree snaps when the winds come through and it falls over and you've got this trunk stuck up there. The longleaf is so together, it's not, the whole dang tree comes up and the root ball pulls up out of the ground. It's a big difference. Tensile strength of the longleaf pine ecosystem. It's a very dense, heavy pine. All right, back to this. Sorry, there was another little side note.
In rivers and lakes. For example, Lake Menindee, part of this system, would almost completely dry up during severe droughts, turning from vast bodies of water into dusty hollows, which is a stark illustration of the scale of the problem. Similar phenomena have been observed in other water bodies like Lake Torrens in South Australia, which, though a salt lake, periodically dries up, its existence entirely dependent on rare downpours. Of course, water shortages also affect rice, which is grown directly in water. Sometimes its fields are simply wiped out due to yet another shortage of this vital liquid resource, but that's not even the worst of it. Think about it. Most of Australia today is pretty much the same as it was 40 million years ago. For many Australians, that's obviously a point of pride, but there's a problem. Millions of years of weathering and a lack of major volcanic activity, which normally enriches the soil, have left huge areas of Australian land extremely infertile. The phosphorus deficiency in Australia's soil is the biggest issue because without this energy boost, plants can't even get off the ground, or they just never reach their normal healthy state. Fun fact that sheds light on the situation, in Australia there are even plants called Banksias that grow special roots. They release organic acids to help extract phosphorus fuel where ordinary crops would just wither. This proves that Australian soil's been like this for millions of years. Even some plants have adapted to the conditions. Australia's soil history also has affected the availability of many other elements like zinc, potassium, sulfur, copper, and boron. They're in short supply too. On top of that, Australia's dry and often hot climate slows down the breakdown of organic materials like fallen leaves and plant debris, which limits humus buildup. This results in poor soil structure, low water retention, and reduced nutrient availability for plants. In the end, many
Okay, so that's one thing in the southeast. We don't have that issue. We have plenty of leaves that hit the ground, and we can. It takes a lot of time for that stuff to break down and become part of the soil. Coming from leaf litter to compost to topsoil, it takes quite a while. But that's a good, dark, fertile soil when that comes along. So that's your preferred way to do your soil rather than throwing a bunch of chemicals at it.
Agricultural areas have organic carbon levels below 1 to 2%. You know how much you need for stable fertility? At least 3 to 6%.
Yeah.
And when you combine droughts with unfertile soil, it becomes a real problem for rice farmers. For example, during one of the droughts called the Tinderbox drought, which happened in 2017 to 2019 in southeastern Australia, irrigated rice production dropped by over 90%. In the 2018 to 2019 and 2019 to 2020 seasons, such sharp declines in output led to massive financial losses for rice farmers since crop earnings plummet. And here come Charax quadricarinatus and other crayfish species. With their claws, they work as a universal solution, helping with all these problems at once. First off, no one's just tossing crayfish into the fields randomly. The Australians start by grabbing shovels or using special machinery because some earthwork is needed. Trenches are dug around the perimeter of the rice field. The size can vary depending on the crayfish species and other conditions. They're filled with water and young crayfish are released into them. After that, rice is planted in the field. Some time passes until it's ready for the crayfish's attention, and then the whole field is flooded, connecting the trenches and the rice paddies. That's when the fun begins. The combined rice crayfish farming model comes to life. The conditions here are just perfect for the crayfish. As it happens, despite their scary looks, in nature, crayfish are hunted by other predators besides humans. The dugout trenches are great hiding spots where crayfish make their burrows to hide and lay eggs. Plus, the trenches always have water. That's also important because crayfish can't live without it. But then the question arises, how is the rice protected from the crayfish? Well, they can eat it. Rice isn't exactly on the menu for these clawed creatures, but pretty much everything else on the rice field they'll happily munch on. Algae, which thrive in rice fields, are a perfect meal for crayfish. A rice field is a perfect habitat for lots of insects, which are happy to both live and breed in such conditions. The crayfish love it too. They'll gladly munch on those invertebrates. Anything that falls from the rice plants, as well as other organic waste like dead insects, is also a good meal for them. A rice field is basically an all-you-can-eat buffet with tons of food. Plus, there's shelter nearby, so they sleep, breed, and then go feast on a varied menu. Perfect. But in exchange for humans providing these clawed creatures with paradise, the crayfish have to work. First things first, crayfish burrow. As we said, in those very trenches, they create plenty of spots for their daily lives, and this helps with Australia's age-old problem, water shortage. A network of burrows up to 12 inches deep forms, which, according to research, can increase soil porosity by 12 to 18%, depending on conditions. This improves water infiltration into the soil, which in turn reduces surface evaporation. All in all, crayfish are a great way to make water use more efficient. Besides, when crayfish dig burrows, they really improve soil aeration, which is crucial for rice roots and soil organisms. In the flooded, oxygen-starved conditions of a rice field, better aeration is like a performance boost, helping plants absorb more nutrients than if crayfish weren't used. And like we said earlier, crayfish munch on all kinds of organic stuff. That's good not just for them, but also for the plants, because after a hearty meal, crayfish produce waste. Remember how bad the problem...
Oh, and let's not forget, crayfish is what they're calling them in this video. Crawfish is what we call them, or mud bugs, are excellent eating. Now, I don't know if they get into the crawfish like we do down here in South Mississippi, South Louisiana, South Texas. There is a band, we go nuts over crawfish season. We plan our springs around the price of crawfish.
Problems with phosphorus and many other elements are in Australian soil? Well, crayfish waste is exactly that. Phosphorus, nitrogen, and much more, which plants really need. Plus, the phosphorus from crayfish comes in a form that's way easier for rice to absorb. There are even studies confirming that they're actually needed in rice fields. For example, in the rice plus crayfish model, the total nitrogen content in the soil increased by 8.5 to 28.4%, and phosphorus by 8.2 to 30.5% in the top 4 inches, which noticeably nourishes young shoots and ensures good rice growth. And yeah, crayfish...
Now, here's the thing. South Louisiana, symbiotic farming, symbiotic growth, that's been going on for decades and decades before all this science took place. The South Louisiana folks figured out, hey, we need to make sure we're putting crawfish in our fields to help our crop. That's the second crop coming off of it. That's awesome. I'm glad that people around the world are starting to look at what the smart folks down here in the deep South are doing.
Rice fields aren't just a quick way to boost soil nutrients, they're an investment for the future. Researchers found that in crayfish fields, urease and phosphatase activity jumps by up to 71%. These, by the way, are enzymes produced by soil microbes. Without getting too technical, this speeds up the conversion of nitrogen and phosphorus compounds into forms that rice can absorb more easily. This microbial boost strengthens the root system and increases the above-ground biomass of rice by 10 to 15% in the very first season.
There you
By the way, this is how the crayfish also help with another serious problem we haven't mentioned yet. Australia uses a ton of chemical fertilizers to make its soil fertile. Excess synthetic or mineral fertilizers are bad for the soil and the water they end up in when used in huge amounts. Plus, these fertilizers are pretty expensive. And here we have crayfish creating natural fertilizers right in the fields with zero cost to humans. No harm done, plus money saved. Unfortunately, crayfish are only useful for rice fields so far, but it's still a pretty good help. Also, crayfish don't just do all the things we've already talked about, they also eat rice's biggest enemies, weeds and pests. This is, let's say, a natural form of biocontrol that can seriously cut down on herbicide and pesticide use. By the way, they can also harm the health of the soil, plants, and eventually other creatures, including humans. So crayfish actually have a positive impact on the health of everything connected to rice fields. And don't forget about saving money, because...
And they call them yabbies down there. Their yabbies get big. You think we got big crawfish down in South Louisiana? You need to check out the size of these yabbies I've seen on some of the videos where people are catching them, and their survival training, and they're eating yabbies.
You'll either avoid spending on all those chemicals altogether or pay way less. Now it's time to talk about profits. Imagine there are two fields. The first one grows only rice, the second one has rice, but also crawfish crawling around and snapping their claws. Then a drought hits and the rice harvest drops. Or say, crop prices fall lower than originally planned. The first field where only rice is grown is a total disaster. The farmer is deep in the red. On the second field, the farmer loses income from rice, but between the rice plants, there are crayfish that have already multiplied like crazy, and each one can be sold. Let's look at another scenario. Nothing happens to cause issues with the rice, yet the rice crayfish field still comes out on top. Take China's Hubei province as an example, where they're big on this kind of combined farming. A 2.5-acre field growing just rice brings in around $3,000 in net profit. A 2.5-acre field with both rice and crayfish pulls in over $8,000. That means the crayfish nearly triple the profits. So no matter how you look at it, crayfish are also an economic win. You don't need to feed them anything, no fertilizers required. Water may be scarce in Australia, but filling up trenches shouldn't be a big deal. Long story short, crayfish are like the clawed Swiss Army knife and a serious income earner. Unfortunately, there's not much detailed data on the economics of the rice crayfish model in Australia, but there's some info showing that common yabbies like these are pretty popular. They say 2 pounds of live yabbies can go for 20 to 30 Australian dollars wholesale, and with the demand for yabbies always strong, breeding them together with rice is a promising direction. Chances are yabbies will slowly take over Australia's...
All right, so the Australian dollar versus the U.S. dollar, they're paying $20 a pound for crawfish? Sacre. I thought when crawfish hit $4 a pound during the drought we had here a couple of years ago, that was way too high. I remember, buying crawfish when they were 38 cents a pound when you'd get your sacks back in the 80s. Holy crap.
Rice fields, solving several of the country's pressing problems at once. But it doesn't stop at crayfish. Australia has yet another universal solution created by nature. This time it's not for rice fields, but for vineyards. The Apricus Hill Winery in Western Australia's Great Southern region decided to bring in birds for a specific job: snail control. These little pests constantly attack vineyards, especially in spring when buds start blooming. Snails damage young shoots and can even ruin entire grape clusters if they're not stopped in time. Usually chemical baits are used, but Apricus Hill took a different route. They decided to try out a winged workforce. The winery manager bought some Indian runner ducks and Muscovy ducks, then released them into a test area. The result was amazing. Where the ducks were, the snails just disappeared. One of the people involved in this interesting animal release explained in more detail, within a 100-foot radius of where the ducks lived, there wasn't a single snail left. But in the areas without the ducks, they had to go back to using chemicals. To cover the entire area, the farmers raised about 50 ducks from eggs and planned to grow the flock to 200. That should be enough to maintain up to 25 acres of vineyard. The ducks don't just eliminate snails, they do it naturally and for free without harming the vines. Why not use chickens? These birds also handle snails just fine, and they even enjoy it. Thing is, chickens can leave a grape farmer with no grapes. They peck at them. But ducks are happy to nibble on some grass and then top off their lunch with a snail. Dozens of snails. And nearby, you might have goats running around, except they aren't
they'll eat
eating
the
snails,
vines,
they're
too.
munching on weeds. In Australia, their story's just like other introduced species. They cost farmers millions every year and ruin pastures. Traditional methods, herbicides, and manual weeding turn out to be expensive and environmentally risky, especially on steep slopes and hard-to-reach areas. Looking for an alternative, more and more farms are turning to goats, or rather their bottomless appetite. One goat can eat about 20 pounds of weeds a day. Blackberries, thistles, broom, honeysuckle, and wisteria, all these annoy farmers but are part of animals' diets. Their nimble lips help them, allowing them to avoid thorns and prickles to reach the tasty greens. A herd of about a dozen goats can clear a blackberry patch the size of a one-car garage in roughly a day. For example, on a farm in New South Wales, the owner releases about 20 goats onto weed-infested areas. These nimble herbivores munch the plants right down to the ground, keeping the pests from spreading and choking out the pasture grass. As a result, the farm has nearly stopped using herbicides and manual weeding. Treatment costs have dropped by over 70%, and the pasture has become cleaner and more productive. All in the first.
I'm all about this. I'm all about symbiotic. I'm all about biological control rather than chemical control for your herbicides. For plant control. Now, one thing goats will not touch: Kogon grass. Kogon grass has been coming up all through the South. It started in Mobile, and it is slowly growing and coming, and it is all over South Mississippi. You drive down the roadways, and I play, yep, Kogon grass patch, Kogon grass patch, Kogon grass patch. And the chemicals that they use to treat that stuff is expensive. And it's not like you can go out there and throw a bunch of goats in the field. That does nothing. Because the goats, it's bad when a goat won't even eat it. I guarantee you.
Season. To make the method universal, a service emerged that could be called goat rental. A herd is delivered right to the site, placed in a mobile electric pen, and left for a week or two until the animals handle the job. This scheme turned out to be profitable both for large agricultural enterprises and for owners of small farms or even school gardens. Renting goats is cheaper than repeated herbicide treatments or manual labor costs, and the efficiency is higher. Goats, of course, also produce something that can help local farmers with that very problem of nutrient-deficient soil. Just like the other animals in today's video, they only eat natural organic stuff, so whatever comes out of goats is pure benefit. In farmers' terms, it's fertilizer. Packed with phosphorus and nitrogen, it spreads evenly across the pasture, improving the soil structure and fertility. This might make you wonder, why not go with similar animals, say cows? While the manure part's the same, their eating habits are a whole other story. Unlike cows, goats go for the weeds, sparing the good grasses. Though in Australia, they sometimes use goats when they need to eat absolutely everything in their path. Goats as infrastructure project participants? Why not? In 2024, 570 workers produced over 150,000 concrete segments for a 15-mile-long section of the Sydney Metro at a site with 3 massive hangars. And this whole workforce got 20 unexpected helpers who really love munching on all kinds of greenery. The goats had one simple job: to munch on the weeds around the plot, yanking them out by the roots before they could bloom and spread. In the end, the goats got fed, and the people managed to cut down on noise and emissions from mowing equipment, as well as the environmental impact of pesticides. A perfect match.
Awesome.
So using animals to solve Australia's problems is a tried and true method, eco-friendly and cost-effective. It helps to avoid using chemicals, boost productivity, and maintain ecosystem balance all at once. The perfect solution.
I'm digging it. I'm digging it. That was a good video. I liked it. And I did chime in. I'm sorry that I jumped in and started talking with y'all. But hopefully what I said made a little bit of sense to you. And I appreciate y'all watching. Hope y'all come back again in the future. If you've made it this far in the video, please consider mashing that like button. And if you really like the content, please make sure you hit that subscribe button. That helps me out more than you know. And I want to know from y'all, where have you seen animals helping with the other parts of agriculture? Just mention them in the comments. Tell me in the comments where you've seen animals helping agriculture, because it happens more than you know. Unlike that government corporate strip farming, kill off everything that's in there. It makes me, I laugh every time I hear people say you shouldn't eat animals, and I'm a vegetarian because I don't want to kill animals. If you only knew all the animals that get killed by corporate farming, anything that cuts their profit margin on that field and producing a crop, anything on that field gets just laid to waste. So this is working with the animals that are in the area and beneficial to the crops. So I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Again, thank y'all for watching. Y'all come back and see us again in the future. Check out some of my other stuff. I've got playlists with Fat Daddy Eats. That's where I'm doing cooking videos. Being an old paramedic, I've got a podcast called Getting 10-8, where it's usually a bunch of us old medics getting together and talking and reminiscing and cutting up. And I've got some natural resource videos on here. So while you're here, look around the channel and see what you can find. And look forward to hearing from y'all in the comments. And hope y'all have a great week.